The great hall aboard the Illyrian starship Velastor was silent. Hundreds of important beings stood in rows, humans on one side, aliens on the other. The walls were made of polished stone and glowing blue crystal, them like a cathedral with banners of peace and war hanging from it. This was not a normal meeting. It was history. For the first time, the Illyrian Empire and the humans of Earth had agreed to a peace treaty. After years of fighting, they had finally come to talk. The Illyrians were older, stronger, and proud. Humans were new to the stars, and many thought they were too wild, too emotional. At the center of the hall stood Princess Lysira of the Flameborn House, dressed in silver armor with flowing violet robes. Her skin was smooth like marble, and her silver eyes scanned every face like they could read thoughts. Next to her stood the High Chancellor, visors and royal guards. Across from them stood Earth's diplomats and military leaders in their best uniforms, and among the human soldiers in the back row stood someone unexpected. Private Callan Ward. He was young, very young, only 19. He wasn't a famous hero or a leader. He was just a supply runner, someone who brought food and parts to the front lines. He had short black hair, a slim build, and eyes that always looked like they were still learning. Callan shouldn't have been there. His name had been added to the delegation by mistake when his commanding officer was injured. No one fixed it. There were bigger things to worry about. So now, there he stood, nervous, silent, and trying not to move. The ceremony began. Speeches were made. Promises were said. The translators buzzed softly. People bowed, clapped, or stayed silent, depending on their traditions. Then came the moment when Princess Lysira had to bless the peace with her words. She stepped forward, lifting a crystal staff, and began to speak. But then she stopped. Her silver eyes moved slowly across the human group. Then they landed on Callan. She tilted her head. Everyone noticed. The room grew tense. The translator paused. The princess walked forward, past the Earth ambassador, past the generals, past even her own guards. She stood directly in front of Callan. Her eyes searched his face like he was a puzzle. Then, in a calm, clear voice, she said, "This one. I claim this one for the trial of flame." Gasps filled the air. The human side began to murmur. What did that mean? Was it a threat? An insult? The Earth diplomat stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "Private Ward is a non-ranked soldier." Surely Lysira raised her hand. The room went quiet again. She turned to her. "People, the trial must be fulfilled by the one who walks unshaped. This human is unshaped, untested, pure." She turned back to Callan. "Do you accept the challenge?" Callan looked around, confused. He hadn't spoken a word all day. Now the most powerful woman in the galaxy was asking him something no one even understood. "What is the challenge?" he asked quietly. Lysira smiled slightly, just at the corner of her mouth. "It is the test of spirit, mind, strength. It shows who is worthy to walk among the stars." Another voice came, this time from the Illyrian High Chancellor. "Your Highness, with respect, the trial of flame is for nobles and champions. This human is no such thing." Lysira did not move her gaze from Callan. "That is the point," she said. Callan swallowed hard. He had no training for this, had never been to another planet until the war. He didn't know alien customs or how to fight in their ways. He looked at the faces around him. Some were angry, some were curious, some were laughing silently. Then he thought of something his grandfather used to say. "The strong aren't the ones who choose the fight, but the ones who don't run when it comes." Callan took a breath. "I accept," he said. Another wave of gasps. The translator repeated it in the alien language. The Illyrians stared. The humans looked shocked. "Princess." Lysira stepped back and lifted her staff high. "Let the trial begin." A loud bell echoed through the chamber. The ceremony was no longer about peace. It was now about a challenge. And a strange human who had stepped into something much bigger than he could understand. His guards moved to escort Callan out. He turned to look back once. The human general nodded at him, not with approval, but with warning. Callan nodded back, straightened his back, and walked forward. He didn't know what the trial of flame was. He didn't know why she chose him. But he knew one thing: he wouldn't quit. The ship that carried Callan away was silent. Large silver walls, soft glowing lights, and guards who didn't speak. He sat alone in the center, his hands resting on his knees, trying not to shake. Everything had happened so fast. One moment he was standing in the back row of a ceremony. The next, he was being taken across the galaxy to face a trial made for alien nobles and champions. The trial of flame. He had never heard of it before. But from the way everyone had reacted, he knew it was serious. Across from him sat a single Illyrian, a warrior in dark blue armor with gold lines running across it. The warrior finally spoke. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." Callan looked up. Maybe both. The warrior didn't smile. "Many have died in the trial. Some were warlords. Some were sons of kings. It's all trained for years." Callan nodded slowly. "And now, I go in with nothing?" "You go in with what you bring inside you," the warrior replied. "Ah! That is the rule. No weapons, no training, only will." Callan didn't say anything after that, just stared at the floor, thinking. 2 days later, arrival at Vaskra was a deadly moon covered in sharp rocks. Red skies and deep forests filled with strange creatures. It was one of the sacred testing worlds of the Illyrians. When Callan stepped off the shuttle, he felt the dry wind on his face. It smelled like ash and iron. He was led to a circular arena made of stone and metal, with seats high above for spectators. In the middle of the arena stood Princess Lysera. She looked calm, her silver eyes steady. "Welcome, Private Ward," she said. Callan gave a slight nod. "Still not sure why I'm here, Your Highness." "You are here," she said, "because your kind speaks of honor, freedom, and heart. We will see if those words have weight." She walked closer, stopping just a few steps away from him. "There are 3 trials. The first begins now. If you fail, you return to your people in shame. If I survive, if you pass, you take a step no human has ever taken." Callan took a deep breath. Then, let's get started. Trial 1. The Hall of Echoscallan was led down a tunnel into a stone room with no lights. The door closed behind him, and the room became dark and cold. Then voices filled the air. At first they were quiet, then louder. Then they started to shout. They were memories, his memories. He heard his father yelling during their last argument before he joined the army. He heard the screams from the battlefield on Lunar Station 9. He saw faces of friends he had lost. The room attacked his mind, not his body. "You are weak. You don't belong here. You will die a nobody." He dropped to his knees, hands on his ears, but the voices came from inside. His heart pounded. His breathing turned rough. It felt like drowning in thoughts. But then, something happened. A small voice, calm and real, rose inside him. It was his mother's voice. "You are stronger than you think, Callan. Pain is part of growing. Don't stop." He opened his eyes. The room was still dark, but his fear was smaller now. He stood up. The voices kept shouting, but he walked through them. Each step was slow, heavy but forward. Then the door opened. Light poured in. He had passed the first trial. Outside the hall, the Illyrians watched from above. They had seen warriors scream and cry in that chamber. Some never came out. Princess Lysera watched quietly. One of her advisors spoke. "He is not powerful, not fast, not even trained. But he adapts." Lysera said nothing. But inside, something had changed. She had expected the human to break, to beg for help, to give up. But he hadn't. Later that night, Callan sat by a small fire inside a stone tent. He had been given food and water, but nothing else. His hands were shaking again. The first trial had hurt him in a way he didn't expect. Not in his body, but deep inside. Still, he was alive. He had walked through it. As he sat, he heard someone approach, looked up hand. was surprised to see Princess Lysira herself, standing alone. "No guards?" he asked. "I do not fear you." She replied simply. Callan half smiled. "That makes two of us." She looked at him for a long moment. "You could have refused the trial. Why didn't you?" He looked into the fire. "Because where I come from, if you're called out, stand up, even if your knees shake." Lysira sat across from him, folding her robes. In Illyrian culture, honor is shown through strength. Strength without struggle is just noise. You... struggle. Callan looked at her, surprised by her words. "Tomorrow will be harder." She added. "I figured," he said softly. She stood again. "Rest well. Private ward. The next trial will test your body, not your mind." Then she left him alone again. Callan looked up at the stars through the roof of the tent. Somewhere out there, Earth waited. His friends, his family. People who didn't know he had become a part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't chosen. But maybe that's why this mattered. The next morning came fast. Callan woke to the sound of a horn blowing across the rocky plain. He sat up, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and stepped outside his stone tent. The sky above was dark red with two moons still glowing. Alien birds circled high above. Strange smell filled the air, like smoke and iron mixed together. Guards were already waiting for him. Without a word, they led him through a long path, deeper into the mountains of Vaskra. They walked in silence for nearly an hour until they reached a wide canyon filled with white mist. At the center of the canyon stood a platform made of black stone. Floating above it was a cage shaped like a giant dome, glowing with blue symbols. Inside the cage stood a beast. It was like nothing Callan had ever seen. The creature was 4 meters tall, with thick gray skin, 4 arms, and glowing red eyes. Its back was covered in sharp spikes, and its tail swayed like a snake. Its breath steamed in the cold air. Callan's mouth went dry. "Welcome," said a deep voice. It was Princess Lysira. She stood near the edge of the canyon, looking down at him. "This is your second trial. It is called the Beast of Breakthal." Callan looked at the monster again, then back at her. "I don't suppose I get a weapon this time," she raised. An eyebrow. "No, of course not," he thought. She continued. "This creature was created through science and nature. It is strong, it is fast, and it has never been defeated in combat." Callan frowned. "Wait, never, never."
He looked
"Around the platform? Then how am I supposed to beat it?" "You are human," she said, her voice calm but curious. "You tell me." The trial begins. The platform shook as the cage opened. The beast roared a deep, thunderous sound that echoed across the canyon. Its red eyes locked onto Callan, and in seconds, it dropped onto the stone floor with a crash. Callan didn't run. Not yet. Instead, he looked around. There were no weapons, no traps, nothing. Just him and the beast. The monster charged. Callan barely rolled to the side in time. The beast slammed into the ground where he had stood, cracking the stone. He got to his feet and ran, dodging around a tall pillar. The beast followed, roaring again. But something felt off. The creature wasn't just angry, it was confused. Sniffed the air. Its movements were wild, not focused. Callan ducked behind a rock and waited. He remembered what the Illyrian warrior had said back on the ship. "Go in with what you bring inside you." He had no strength, no training in hand-to-hand combat, but he had something else. Observation, not a fight, a pattern asked. The minutes passed. Callan watched. He stayed out of reach, moving fast, climbing rocks, jumping down, always just ahead of the beast, and slowly he noticed something. The creature didn't attack in random ways. It followed a rhythm. Left step, roar. Charge, turn, right, swipe. Pause. Then repeat. It was like a dance. A pattern. It had been trained. Callan narrowed his eyes. If it had been trained, maybe it could be retrained. A new plan. Callan picked up a broken stone and threw it at the beast's back, not to hurt it, but to get its attention. The beast roared and turned. He whistled sharply. The creature blinked. Callan clapped. "Come on," he yelled. He ran again, but this time slower. The creature followed. He stopped suddenly and raised his hands. The beast skidded to a halt, just a few steps away. It tilted its head. Callan didn't move. They stared at each other, red eyes versus brown. Then Callan did something strange. He sat. Down the crowd watching from above gasped. The beast stepped. Closer, sniffed, growled, but didn't attack. Then it sat down to silence even. Princess Lysera looked surprised. Callan slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small energy ration bar, his only food from the night before. He unwrapped it and placed it on the ground between them. The beast sniffed it, then licked it once. Then again, then swallowed it. Callan exhaled. He had made contact. A new kind of victory 10 minutes later. The trial was over. Callan walked out of the canyon with the beast walking behind him, quiet and curious. The Illyrians above had no words. Some were angry, some confused, some impressed. Princess Lysera stepped down from the stone steps and walked toward him. "That was not combat," she said. "No," Callan replied. "It was communication. We were supposed to defeat the beast." "I did," he said. "Oh. Not the way you expected." She looked at the creature behind him, now sitting peacefully. "Why didn't you try to kill it?" "'Cause it wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to protect something. Or maybe it was afraid. And where I come from, we don't hurt something just because we don't understand it." Lysera looked at him in silence. Then, softly, she spoke. "Perhaps that is strength too." That night back at his tent, Callan sat beside the fire again. His legs ached. His head hurt. But he was alive. 2 trials down. 1 left he didn't know. What the third would be, but he had learned something. He didn't need to be the strongest or smartest. He just had to be human, and maybe that was enough. The wind howled across the rocky surface of Vaskra. Callan stood on a high platform as the final trial was explained. His body still ached from the second test, but his mind was clear. He had come too far to back down now. Above him, the alien sky swirled with deep purple clouds. The last trial had a name, the trial of loyalty, and it was said to be the most difficult of all. Not because it tested strength, not because it tested skill, but because it tested the heart, Princess. Lysera stood beside the trial master and looked down at Callan. Her face was calm, but her voice carried weight. "This trial will take place inside the Chamber of Illusion. What you see will not be real, but your choices will be." Callan raised his eyes. "What kind of choices?" She didn't answer directly. "You'll be shown something important. How you act will decide your worth." Callan nodded slowly. He had faced fear. He had faced a beast. Now, he would face something harder, his own soul. Inside the chamber, Callan stepped into the chamber. The door shut behind him with a loud sound. The walls shimmered with soft white light. Then the floor faded. He was no longer in the chamber. He was on Earth, at least. That's what it looked like. He stood in a ruined city. Buildings burned in the distance. Sirens echoed. The sky was black. With smoke, ahead of him stood a massive screen showing a message. Earth under attack. Callan's heart raced. It felt so real he could smell the burning wood, feel the heat on his face. And then he saw them. His family, his mother, his younger sister, and his old friend, Juno, running across the street, dodging explosions. They looked up and called his name. "Callan, help us." Before he could move, another image appeared on the other side. Princess Lysa. She was trapped inside a collapsing tower. Fire spread around her. Alien debris had fallen through the ceiling. She looked weak, injured. She was bleeding. Another message appeared in the sky. "You can save only one." Callan's stomach dropped. This was the trial. Save your family. Or save the alien princess. One was his blood, his past, his home. The other was the future, an ally, a symbol of peace, the ruler of an empire. Callan looked back and forth. His hands trembled. "Callan," his sister screamed. "Human," Lysera cried. Outthought the clock on the screen began to count down. 10, 9. His mind raced. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break the rules. But deep down, he knew what this was. It wasn't real. It was a test. Still, it felt real, painfully real. He closed his eyes. What would the world expect him to do? What would his heart want him to do? And what would honor demand? Then, suddenly, the answer came. The choice. Callan turned toward the collapsing tower and ran. He didn't look back at the image of his family. He didn't cry. He ran straight into the fire, inside the tower. He found Lysira's image pinned under a beam, pulled her out, and carried her through the flames. As the building fell, he covered her with his body. Everything went dark. Back to reality, the lights in the chamber returned. Callan lay on the floor, breathing hard, covered in sweat. Princess Lysira stood nearby, watching him carefully. "You chose to save me," she said softly. "Even when the illusion showed your family in danger," Callan sat up slowly. "I hated doing it." "But you did it," she replied. "I thought about what matters most in the long run," he said, voice quiet. "If I saved my family and let you die, your empire might turn against Earth. Billions could suffer. Maybe millions would die." He took a shaky breath. "So I made the choice I didn't want to make. That's loyalty not to a person, but to peace." There was silence for a moment. Then Lysira stepped closer. "You were not trained for this. You were not chosen for this. But you have passed all 3 trials." He looked at her. "Does that mean I can go home?" She gave a small smile. "It means you're not just going home. You're going home as the first human to be honored by the Illyrian Empire." The tribunal, gathering a few hours later, the great leaders of both the Illyrian Empire and the Earth delegation gathered again in a wide-open hall on Voskra. This time, the mood was different. Respect filled the air. Princess Lysira stood at the front, holding a crystal staff. Callan stood beside her in simple clothes, still dirty from the trials. "This human," she declared, "was not trained as a warrior. He is not a commander or a noble. He was sent here by chance." She turned toward the Illyrians. "But he has shown something more valuable than strength. He showed will, compassion, and sacrifice. He did not fight like us," he thought. Felt. He endured. Then she turned toward the humans. He stood when he could have stepped back. He chose peace over pride. And that makes him worthy. She raised the staff and touched it to his shoulder. "By the right of my house and the law of my people, I name Private Callan, ward friend of flame and voice of earth." The hall erupted in a strange, quiet form of applause, hands pressed. Over hearts' heads bowed, Callan looked down at the floor, unsure how to feel. He wasn't a hero. He was still just a guy from a farm. But for the first time, he felt like he had earned his place among the stars. Callan had expected the ceremony to end with some fanfare, a grand speech, maybe a medal, or at least a handshake from Princess Lysira. Instead, things were quieter. The quietest they had been since the first trial. He stood alone in the center of the large Illyrian hall, surrounded by alien leaders and human officials. It felt surreal. His legs still felt like jelly from the trials. But his mind was sharper than ever. Princess Lysira had finished her declaration. He was no longer a regular human soldier. In the eyes of the Illyrians, he had become something much more, a symbol. The Illyrian Empire had always been proud and full of nobility. But for the first time in its history, someone from Earth, someone completely ordinary, had earned their respect. As the ceremony continued, Callan couldn't help but think back to the trials. The 3rd trial, the test of strength, the 3rd trial. The one that awaited him was the hardest. He had been told little about it, just that it was the test of spirit. Callan didn't feel like his spirit had ever been tested more than in the 2nd trial, the trial of loyalty. He had chosen the alien princess over his family in the illusion. The weight of that choice still sat heavy on his heart. It wasn't that he regretted his decision, it was just that he had never been asked to make such a choice before. Now, would face the final test, and with every step he took toward the arena, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more he was meant to understand. The Arena of Flames. Arena stood in the center of the capital city. It was massive, built from stone and metal, surrounded by a glowing barrier. The walls reached high into the sky, a place that had witnessed the most grueling battles in Illyrian history. The human delegation was there, watching with growing nervousness. Even the most seasoned diplomats and soldiers were uncertain about Callan's chances. Callan stood at the entrance to the arena. His breath was steady, but his heart raced. Well, it wasn't the monster this time. It wasn't the mind games. It was something deeper. The gates opened. He stepped forward, facing the unknown. Voice echoed through the arena. This is the trial of flame. Callan squinted against the bright light that suddenly flared across the arena. The ground beneath him shifted, and before he could react, a massive wall of flame shot up from the ground. The fire seemed to have a mind of its own, twisting and curling as if it was alive. Callan's eyes widened in shock, but he didn't step back. This wasn't just a test of strength. This was a test of his resolve, his ability to face fear and to rise above it. The flames moved toward him, closing in. Callan did the only thing he could think of. He ran. Confronting the flames, the fire roared behind him, crackling like 1,000 voices. The heat pushed against his skin, but he didn't falter. He had faced so much worse. He had already faced betrayal, his own self-doubt, and the loss of everything familiar. Now, he was being pushed to his limit. He ran faster. His thoughts were scattered at first, but then something clicked. The fire wasn't chasing him, trying to force him to stop. If he gave in to the fear, if he turned away or slowed down, he would fail. He wasn't going to fail. With every step, reminded himself of what he had come to understand in the trials before this. It wasn't about defeating the fire. It wasn't about overpowering it. It was about enduring it. It was about holding his ground even when it seemed like everything would burn away. The final challenge? As the fire closed in, Callan spotted a gap in the flames. It wasn't much, just enough to allow him through. But he had to make it. With his heart pounding, he ran straight toward the opening. His legs burned from exhaustion, but his will was stronger. He dove through the gap just as the fire exploded. Behind him, blocking his escape, when he landed on the other side, he lay still for a moment, chest heaving, feeling the searing heat that had followed him so closely. But he was alive. And then, from above, a voice spoke. You have passed. The flames around him faded. The weight of the trials Callan didn't stand right away. He was exhausted. But as the final trial ended and the arena began to quiet, he realized something important. He hadn't won through brute force, or by doing anything impressive. He had survived. The truth of the trial had been simple. Endure. Stand firm. Never quit. Those were the qualities that would define him, and the qualities that made him worthy of the title he had been given. The voice of Earth, Lysira, appeared beside him. There were no cheers, no applause, just a quiet respect. You endured the fire, she said softly, not with power, but with spirit. Callan slowly stood, wiping the sweat from his brow. Did what I had to, he said quietly. I'm just a soldier. I'm not here for fame or glory. I'm here because Earth doesn't give up, not when it matters. Lysira studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, as if she understood something deeper now. Perhaps you understand something we have forgotten, she said. Illyrians are strong, but strength alone is not enough. You showed that. The final word, the Illyrian leaders, along with the human diplomats, gathered again in the Grand Hall. This time, it was official. The treaty was about to be signed. Callan stood at the front, alongside Princess Lysira. The moment of truth had arrived, in front of the gathered leaders. Princess Lysira held up the peace treaty and spoke. This is not just a document. It is a promise. A promise that the strength of humanity, of its spirit and its will stand with the Illyrian Empire from this day forward. She turned to Callan, her voice quiet but clear. You have proven that strength comes in many forms. You are the first of your kind to be called worthy. Callan looked at the treaty, then back at Lysera. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a leader. But in that moment, he felt like he had finally earned a place among the stars. The great hall of the Illyrian starship Velastor was filled with silence. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but one of anticipation. Leaders from both the Illyrian Empire and the Earth delegation were gathered in rows, waiting for the final words to be spoken. Princess Lysera stood at the front, the crystal staff in her hand glowing faintly. Beside her stood Private Callan Ward, who still wore his simple uniform, but his face had changed. The young soldier who had walked into the first trial full of doubt had emerged from each test more confident, more sure of himself. He wasn't. The same person who had stood on Earth, unsure of his place. In the trials, Callan had discovered not only what he was capable of, but also what humanity as a whole was capable of, as the ceremony continued. The tension in the room grew. Everyone was waiting for the declaration to come, the final promise. That would solidify Earth's place among the stars. Callan stood tall, though his legs still trembled from the weight of the trials. The memory of the final test, the flames, still burned in his mind. But he had faced the trial not with power or speed, but with endurance. And that had carried him through. The treaty princess Lysera raised her staff, signaling for silence. All eyes turned to her. This treaty, she began. Her voice echoing in the massive hall, is more than just an agreement between two worlds. It is a bond forged in trials, not just of strength, but of spirit, of loyalty, and of honor. Turned to face Callan, who stood by her side, his eyes focused forward. Private Callan Ward has proven what it means to be human, not through force or war, but through the strength to endure, to choose, and to protect. Through his trials, he has shown us the very essence of humanity: resilience in the face of the impossible, courage in the face of fear. The crowd was still. No one moved, as if they understood the weight of what Lysera was about to say. She raised her hand high. And so, by the authority of the flame-born house and the laws of my people, I hereby declare that Earth shall be granted equal status among the stars. A murmur ran through the room. Some Illyrians seemed stunned, others uncertain. Was clear? The balance had shifted. Humanity was no longer just a small part of the galaxy, they were now equals. Callan's heart raced. He had dreamed of this moment, but standing here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a new responsibility. The symbol of Unitalicia stepped closer to Callan. She looked at him with something that almost resembled respect in her silver eyes. You are no longer just a soldier, Callan Ward. You are now the symbol of humanity's place in the galaxy. The trials you have faced, the choices you have made, have earned you this honor. Callan shook his head, his voice quiet. Just a soldier. I don't deserve. Lysera held up her hand, stopping him. No, you have earned this. You've represented humanity in a way no one else has. You have shown us that humanity is not a people of just brute strength, but of strength of heart. Callan didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure he felt worthy of the title. He wasn't a noble. He wasn't a general. He was a farm boy from Earth who had stepped into the unknown. But in this moment, surrounded by the leaders of two worlds, he finally understood. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about standing up when the universe was stacked against you and saying, I'm still here. A new era of the ceremony continued with formalities, but Callan's mind was elsewhere. The weight of what had just happened was sinking in. Earth had been accepted as an equal, but there was more to it than just a diplomatic victory. The bond between the Illyrians and humans was not just forged in treaties and signatures. It was forged in actions, the choices made by one human soldier who had stepped forward when no one else would. When the ceremony finally ended, Callan was escorted to a quiet room in the back of the ship. He had been given time to rest, but it was clear that things were changing, both for him and for humanity. As he sat alone in the room, couldn't help but think of the trials. The fire, the beast, the illusions. They had tested him in ways he had never expected, and yet each time, he had learned something new, not just about the galaxy, but about himself. An unexpected visit, the door opened, and Princess Lysira stepped. Inside, she looked at Callan, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to speak with you," she said. Callan nodded. "About what?" "About your future," she replied. "About Earth's future." He stood up, a little confused. "What do you mean?" Lysira stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You've proven yourself to be more than just a soldier. You are now a representative of your people. I believe we could learn much from each other. Earth, with all its flaws, its struggles, it's what the galaxy needs." Callan didn't speak. He had no idea how to respond. "I want you to stay." Here, Lysira continued, "to be part of something bigger. To help guide humanity into the future as more than just an observer. You have earned that role." Callan took a deep breath. He wasn't sure he was ready for this. He was still the same farm boy inside. But he had already stepped into the unknown, and it seemed there was no turning back now. "I'll stay," he said, after a long pause. "But only if Earth can be part of this. I don't want to be just an ambassador. I want to make sure that humanity's place here is earned, not just given." Lysira smiled slightly, then it settled. A new beginning. Callan's heart was heavy with the weight of what he had agreed to, but he didn't feel afraid. For the first time, he felt like he had a purpose, one that was bigger than himself. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something more. A bridge between two worlds, as the stars twinkled outside the ship's windows. Callan looked out into the vast expanse of space. A new chapter was beginning, not just for him, but for humanity. It was a beginning he never could have imagined, but it was one that he was ready for.